Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here. My heart is brimming. I am so obsessed with this podcast. I'm so grateful for you, for being here, for listening. I cannot believe the phenomenal, amazing women that I am meeting, having these gorgeous conversations with, completely filling my cup to overflow. My saucer is overflowing. There's a mess all over the table. There's so much goodness. And I also love how it's growing, how the ideas in my heart that are inspired by these conversations and by you are creating this entirely separate entity to my business. It's amazing. We started the membership last week. It's the Say Yes Sisterhood. It's phenomenal. We have some gorgeous summits coming up, virtual summits with so many of the podcast guests that you've already heard, so many that are in the queue that you're about to hear. These beautiful opportunities for us to be together in community, in conversation, in real time, where we're asking questions. And it's just so good. It's so, so good. There are spaces in the membership if you are wanting to join the Say Yes Sisterhood. That is a community of fabulous, high vibe, heart-centered women that are just cheering each other on toward our next yes. It's so beautiful. We have weekly calls. We have an in-person retreat coming up. There's a Paris retreat for members only. There's so many good things, workshops, opportunities to connect, opportunities to be on a podcast recording live with the guest, and then having private Q&As after our conversation. Like, so much goodness is coming. And I have a morning routine. So, tomorrow I'll be meditating and journaling, and 1,000 more good ideas are going to come. And I'm so excited to share them with you. Okay. It's so good. And today's guest is no exception. Dara McKinley. Oh, this conversation, I just love her so much. I was obviously attracted to the work that she's doing, but as soon as her beautiful face came up on the screen for us to have a conversation, I love her, just like I love you for listening. It's a love fest for sure. So Dara McKinley has studied and worked in the realm of spirituality and health for over 3 decades. In 2012, difficult life circumstances pointed her to forgiveness, where she realized that many spoke prolifically about why one should forgive, but no one spoke of how. Her background enabled her to successfully create and follow a forgiveness path that worked. But in the years that followed, the experience made her see some significant themes. In particular, she saw how mainstream forgiveness, understanding, which is pardoning, ceasing anger, having compassion, and letting go, was obscuring the forgiveness path. She also saw that people who identified as spiritual but not religious required a forgiveness path that was clear and logical. All of this inspired Dara to devote her professional life to understanding forgiveness's infrastructure and to making forgiveness the practical healing modality it was always meant to be. I loved this conversation. I already told you I love this woman. I know you are going to love both as well. I cannot wait to hear what you think about this fabulous conversation I had with Dara McKinley. Dara, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much. I can already tell this is going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here also.
Oh, thank you. Well, let's just start off with the question I ask all of my guests, and that is, how are you saying yes to yourself in this season?
How am I saying yes to? I'm saying yes to myself by fully putting myself out there into the land of podcasts. And,
Mm.
I've read on your website how you wake up every morning and you ask the universe, what would you like me to do today? And so I asked the universe the same question, and they're like, we would like you to be a spokesperson for forgiveness. So I say yes by putting myself out there to all these podcasts and having interesting conversations with people like you.
Oh, I love that for you. And I can tell you from this side of the microphone, it's so fun. It's a super safe, fabulous place to be. And anytime you have an experience that's different than that, then just come back here and we'll right the ship.
It has been an incredible experience so far you meet so many interesting people, right?
Right? And I feel like conversation for me is such a gift and point of connection that comes naturally to me. And
Mhm.
I love the conversations that I have unexpectedly, whether it's someone that I'm standing in line with for coffee or sitting next to them on the airplane or some fun thing. But the conversations that I have the joy and pleasure and delight of having here on the podcast, because they are coupled with the delight that that kind of connection already has for me, plus the intention of being in service to the listener and celebrating how we're saying yes to ourselves in big and small ways. It just, I feel like it's such a beautiful up level that I get to curate for myself every week.
I love it.
It's really fun.
Yeah, it's amazing that you're holding this container for this like very deep and uplifting conversation where people can just drop in, and once the
Yes.
conversation's over, they're like, "Oh, I feel so in alignment with who I am." I'm just saying, like, this is my observation of you. I think we've been talking now for 8 minutes.
I love it all. I'm changing my bio to everything you just said. It's like, oh my gosh. You know how beautiful that is when somebody sees you? I
Gold.
mean, that's everything.
It's everything, right?
Thank you for
Yep.
seeing me.
My pleasure.
Oh,
It's like my favorite thing to do is to
oh,
be
you're
seen and
so
to
good at
authentically
it.
see, to authentically see other people. I think it's just like, it's just gold. It's like, I mean, there's nothing that uplifts us and brings us,
Right,
forward, than like seeing each other.
right. And what else is there?
Right.
It's so good. Oh my gosh. Okay, how is that intertwined with being a spokesperson for forgiveness? And what does that mean to be a spokesperson for forgiveness?
Whew. Okay. So I guess I'll start with how I stepped onto the forgiveness path.
Please.
I was born like a very spiritual little girl, from my earliest memories, I remember feeling a felt sense of unconditional love. And I by no
Mm,
means am an unconditionally loving person. I am messy and complicated like all human beings, but I had this felt sense of unconditional love that was just kind of like always
mm,
right next to me from my earliest days. Anyway, so I proceed to study psychology and spirituality. I end up finding a degree that specifically blends psychology and spirituality, but I'm very much into the alternative stuff. Like I'm, yoga, meditation. The school I went to was a Buddhist school. And in the early 2000s, I had an idea for a business, and I kind of jumped into creating this business with people who I would ultimately be incompatible with. But the
mm.
business took off. And so we kind of endured each other for
Yeah.
as long as we could. And then in 2009, the whole thing blew up,
Mm,
and I lost my part of the business. And at the time, I was half relieved because this was,
sure.
stressful business relationships. I was like, oh, thank God I'm, done with this. And then half
Right.
of me was heartbroken.
Mhm.
So at this point in my life, though, I have 2 decades of psychology and spirituality behind me. So I'm like, okay, Dara, this is a rough blow, but you have the skills to move past this. You're going to lean into your significant relationships. You're going to recreate your life. You're going to focus on the gratitude. You're going to process your emotions, on and on. And so I was like, I can do this. I can move past this. And 3 years later, I still notice, and I think I have my Buddhist training to
Mm,
thank for this ability. I still notice this negative narrative
mm.
looping in my brain about what had happened. And as this is happening, I'm also sliding into a mystery illness, and which was insomnia, anxiety, and fatigue. And the doctors
Oh,
couldn't figure it out. And I had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so I just start getting extremely upset
sure.
and very worried. It was a perfect storm.
Mhm.
And so, because I am very spiritual, I have, I definitely would never say I'm psychic, but I have very strong intuition. I have a strong ability for prayer.
Mhm.
And so I kind of had a down on my knees moment of like,
Yeah.
I need to be guided out of this. Like, I'm freaked out to my core.
Right. I can
Please
imagine.
tell me like what I need to do to move past this.
Before
And
the
the
kids wake up from their nap, please.
right,
Right?
exactly,
It's like,
exactly.
and stat.
Yeah, exactly. And the message I got back was to forgive.
Mm,
So, because I was so spiritually oriented, I was always interested in forgiveness. People
sure.
hear about forgiveness constantly, right? So I'm always like, ooh, and it sounds so great in theory. Like we have this ability to unconditionally love our enemies and to let go and to have compassion and to pardon others. I love it in theory. But whenever I actually like got next to it, I'm a very practical spiritual person. And whenever I got, toe to toe with it, there was nothing for me to grab. It just slipped through my fingers. So
Mm,
here I am at this moment, and I go, well, first of all, when I got that message back, I didn't like it.
sure. You're like,
And so,
and perhaps you need more information, universe, because
exactly, like,
obviously it's not me that needs to do something.
exactly. And I want to illuminate that piece also because I'm
Sure.
speaking for a group of people that I know run into this experience where they
Sure.
come up, toe to toe with forgiveness, and there was something about the word that it had the word give in it, and I had already
Mm,
lost this thing that was so important to me, and so it felt like I was giving more, and
sure.
it felt like I was letting them off the hook, and I did not want this thing to be the answer to my problems.
Right.
So I had a lot of resistance, but again, I was in this perfect storm, and I said, okay, Dara, you are a woman who can follow directions. You're very open. You're up to trying new things. Like, just give this your best shot. And so it's 2012. I open my computer. I type in how to forgive, looking
Sure.
for whoever out there has written, like, here are the five
Right.
steps to how to forgive. And
Oprah,
yeah,
please help
exactly.
me.
So I think I just need to find whoever has written those directions online and
Yeah,
follow it for however long and see what happens.
sure.
And I type in how to forgive, and 99.9% of what comes up is why a person should forgive. And then as I was digging deep, I would find a forum where someone like me would be like, but how do you do it? And the response they were getting back was, you just do it. And
Mm.
so I thought, wow, there is nothing about how to forgive online. So I close the computer and I think, okay, Dara, you're on your own here. You have 2 decades of psychology and spirituality behind you.
Right.
You can figure this out. Because I knew I needed directions. I was like, this is not, I
Sure.
cannot just do it. Like,
Right. I would have already done it if I could
right,
just do it.
exactly. So the question I asked myself that ended up being my first step onto the path, I said, okay, I've been running a negative narrative for 3 years
Mhm.
now about how this shouldn't have happened.
Sure.
How I deserved justice, I deserved some sort of, form of repair, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I've been running this negative narrative and it seems to be sinking me into a hole.
For sure.
So what's the opposite of that? So that was the question I asked myself. What is the
Mhm.
opposite of running this negative narrative? And my answer to that question was, oh, I would bless it with the highest love.
Mm.
And so that was my first step onto the forgiveness path. And there was a number of other things that came together over the coming days. And 3 weeks later, I felt an inner peace that I had not felt since this whole thing had gone down. And I had two thoughts at that time. I thought, wow, keep in mind, I'm a geek for healing modalities, right? As I'm
Sure,
entering
for
into this
sure.
moment.
Right. No, I'm
So,
totally with you. I love if there's something shadowy that comes up, I'm like, "Ooh,
yeah.
ooh, let's get a flashlight in there. I
Right,
gotta
right.
let's get to the bottom of that."
Right. So my first thought was, wow, like forgiveness is for real. Like that
Aw.
worked. Like that's an effective healing modality. And my second thought was, and that wasn't pardoning. Like, why does everyone say that forgiveness is
Mhm.
pardoning? And that was that. And I was just happy I'd figured it out for myself. And I just kind of went on with my life. But I love this new thing that I knew how to do. And I
Right.
started like just trying it. I was like, ooh, I feel a lot of regret about what happened, blah, 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 blah. Let me see if it'll work with this. So I just started playing around with it on my own and went on with my life.
Oh,
And over the coming years, I started having conversations with people about it. And I started to realize that so many people had something they wanted to forgive and lacked a practical path.
mhm.
And most of these people just, fall into the category of spiritual but not religious. But I have
Sure.
since like had a lot of people who are religious, come to my
Right.
work because I teach in a universal way, like it's just universal
Mhm.
spiritual principles. Anyway, so after a few years of having these discussions, I was like, oh my God. And I started also really observing mainstream understanding of forgiveness. And I was seeing how
Sure.
this pardoning definition was actually obstructing the path.
Right. Mhm.
So I was like, wow, I think that, there's a need for this. I should, start bringing this to whoever wants it. And so here I am.
Oh my gosh.
Did that answer your
Thank
question? I
you.
think I lost your
Yes. And
question.
oh my gosh, it's all so beautiful. I have so much to say. First of all, thank you. And thank you for being so generous with sharing the catalyst for this work because sometimes people want to hold anything that isn't sunshine and roses out of view. Right?
Yeah,
So, I
no,
mean, we're
yeah, no,
not here for
I
that.
no,
I
no,
totally get that. It's like, I don't have time. I
no,
do not I have
no.
one life.
At this point, we need to share our messes, right? Like, because
Right,
that's what
please.
creates the resonance, and that's what, yeah, that's what
It
heals.
absolutely does, and
Hmm.
I'm 100% on that page, and I do also just wanna thank you for your generosity
Oh, thank
because
you.
although we believe that this is the way that get shit done, it also doesn't come naturally to people who are living with a lot of fear and have that negative soundtrack that is not only saying, I'm incapable of forgiving that person because of the pardoning factor, and I cannot speak any of this to another person or it will crush me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
one thing that I've realized in doing the spiritual work myself is that the things that I've been afraid to utter for fear that they would crush me actually lose all their power once I voice them.
Right.
And I also used to be afraid to voice my dreams for fear that somebody else would crush them once they got out of my body. I thought they were only safe if they stayed here. And now I know that thoughts grow as they're shared. And
Wow. Hmm.
there are many people who are not available to hear my dreams. And they don't have to listen, but I
Hmm.
am not going to make that my responsibility to manage the comfort level of other people by
Hmm.
staying small. The other
Bravo,
thing,
brava.
thank you, thank you. It feels very good. It feels very good. And I have so much more to say, and I'm very excited about some changes that are in the works right now that I feel are going to be unleashing a new level of freedom in how I use my voice in
Mm,
the coming months. And I'm very, very excited about that as well. So
very exciting, very
I kept
exciting.
myself quiet and small for a long time, but
No
I have
more.
thrown away the key to that door and
Yay,
not even on its
awesome. I
hinges
love it.
anymore.
I love it. I love it. I celebrate you.
Thank you. I received that. I also love the message that came to you in that place of inquiry and desire that was, I bless this situation with the highest love. And that just, it just happened again when I repeated your words. It just brought such warmth over my body. And I just love how profound that stringing those words together, just the beautiful prose that that is. It is easy to say. It comes easily out of your mouth. There's not resistance there because it is relying on something that is bigger than us, but we absolutely have access to and can, right? It's so good. It's
Amen.
so
Amen.
good.
Amen.
And I love that. And I feel like even in your understanding and acknowledging and receiving of that message, this powerful awareness that, oh, I can do that. I can bless this with the highest love. That is the bridge that gets me out of this loop to the woman that I want to be. And it's not a pardoning of what happened and the the altitude, the higher level that that phrase took me made me completely unconcerned with the other parties anyway. Like,
Right.
I really did just bless it with the highest love because I totally don't even care about what you did anymore. And I don't know how that happened. Like, that is transformation. That is, it's so good.
Aw, thank you. I think so.
It
I'm devoting
is.
my life to this, so yeah.
Oh, well chosen.
Thank you.
Well
I feel
chosen.
chosen, yeah,
You
so.
are. You are. Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, it's so good. And what does it look like to devote your life to this message? What does that mean?
Well, it feels like since I was a little girl, having this spiritual orientation towards the world, I was also fascinated with healing and truly like, I could never have articulated it as a kid, but I always just had this inner curiosity and quest to
Mm,
find effective healing modalities. I always like looked at situations and wanted to know what really heals. Like how does a
mm,
person truly recover? Like, and so that's what led me into the world of
right.
psychology and spirituality and then wanting to see where the two intersected. So I feel like I have found one of the many things that truly heals and truly creates repair, like on an embodied level, like really restores
For
peace
sure.
to our bodies and creates new beginnings, and is also this thing that we now forever have in our back pocket. I forever have this in my back pocket, because life
Right.
is challenging in all directions, right? But when you know how to, bless it with the highest love and do kind of the somatic integration that blessing something with the highest love requires in a good way,
Right.
you can get, like you have this like special little magic trick.
I know, I'm such a
Like-
weirdo. I'm like, "Oh, I hope somebody cuts me off today on the way to school pickup because I'm ready to bless them with the highest love." 'Cause it's so great. So I love that you are getting your message out there. Sorry, my volume has gone up. Sorry. Sorry to my podcast editor, Shannon. I just was yelling in your ear. How are we telling more people about this beautiful work?
So I teach a course. That's what I
Yay.
do. I teach a course 3 times a year. And because there's so many words said about forgiveness, and there's so many words said about unconditional love.
Yeah.
And so one of my passions about teaching the course is I do say words about it, but I want more to craft an experience so someone can
Mm,
have their own experience of forgiveness, right? It's
sure.
like I want to move past the concepts and the words. So I teach this six
Right.
week course, and I walk people through the building blocks of how to forgive something. And so step one is developing your connection with unconditional love, because I think you have a
Mm,
very innate connection of it,
mhm.
like I
Yes.
did, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
some people don't have that, but it's working through us and for us. And
Yeah.
so some people have it, and so they're just like, okay, great, show me how to use it, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so they step onto the path in a very confident way. And other people, it's like they need to start paying attention to how it's appearing in their lives. And
Sure.
so a lot of it is through family, through our passions, through our creativity.
Mm,
And one of the big places is through nature. Like a lot of people can get
yeah.
out into nature and they feel a very serene peace in their heart, because
Mhm.
unconditional love, it's very powerful and it's also very peaceful. And people don't typically put those two words together, like power and peace. Like power
Right.
just seems like it's serene and quiet and nice, and power seems like it's,
Right.
like a force of nature. And so those two things are actually true. Like it's
Yes.
in some wild, beyond our mind's understanding kind of way, it's those two forces coming together. And so the first thing I do is help people find where it's appearing in their life. And then once they find it, it's like, that's a medicine.
Yes.
That's medicinal right there. That's not just some like cool thing that we experience here and there and is fleeting. It's like, that's actually
Right.
kind of like a free drug that we have
Exactly.
access to. And then this is another one of the things that I help people understand, is that I believe that we're anatomically designed to do this. And
Ooh, say more.
so, are you familiar with Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor? Have you ever heard
No.
of her? So,
No.
she was a Harvard trained neuroscientist who was completely just going up the ladder of academia.
Sure.
And she suffered a stroke on the left hemisphere of her brain that
Oh,
completely threw her. So, the left hemisphere of the brain is executive functioning, it was everything
right.
that was helping her climb the ladder of academia.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, that went silent, and she got completely thrown into the right hemisphere of her brain, and had this mind-blowing transformational experience about the function of the right hemisphere of the brain. And she wrote a great
Wow.
book about it. So what I teach people is the left hemisphere of the brain is how we navigate the external world, and the right hemisphere of the
Okay.
brain is how we navigate the internal world. And
Okay.
the right hemisphere of the brain doesn't get the development that the left
Mm,
hemisphere does,
sure.
and so but it's right there. All
Mhm.
this, we when we talk about the right hemisphere, we go, oh yeah, that's creativity and emotions and intuition
Mhm.
and spiritual. We kind of just like, again,
That's
just
for
like, yeah,
weekends and
yeah,
holidays. Yeah.
exactly. And it's like, well, actually, creativity, intuition, imagination, and spiritual connection are all the things that a person needs in order to
Mhm.
repair, heal, and regenerate, aka forgive.
Yes.
And so
And
I
create the life that they desire.
Right, right. And create the true
Yeah.
fulfillment is
Yeah.
in it's the soul, right?
Right.
It's the
Mhm.
soul. So I help people like move over to that part of the brain and start working those muscles
Oh
because
my
again, it's
gosh.
for weekends and holidays. And it's like,
Right.
actually, what if we made it the main, or at least for while we're in this course, what if we make it the main attraction, right? Like
Welcome
let's
to my world.
exactly. So anyway, that's the beginning of the course. But I think you did ask me. Did you ask me how being seen has to do with forgiveness, or did I
Yeah,
like?
like how are
Okay,
you incorporating that? Because you
right.
do have this beautiful gift of, I mean, you are accessing the right hemisphere of your brain and tapping in and connecting to other people that are accessing that as well. And I feel like even though at the time that you looked at the clock, we had been talking for 8 minutes, our souls had been talking for a very long time. And I feel like these
Our souls
are
began talking when I dove into your website this morning.
right? And, this week when I was researching you before this conversation, it was like, oh, well, of course I'm talking to this woman. She's me in another room. This is brilliant. I love it so much. And I feel like we have those connections so often with people because of that resonance, because of that being on the same level, it feels more like a rendezvous
Right.
than a first time
Yeah.
meeting,
Yeah.
and it's so beautiful. I
Yeah.
love that, and
Yeah.
I
It's
love
awesome.
that you are holding space for people to move through this process, because unconditional love is a word that I heard a lot growing up in the church and believed that it was only achieved as God talking to me, but not something that I could offer to another person without it looking like self-abandoning.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was something that I had access to receive, but not to give. And I am in a process that has been a few years long of shifting that mindset and having this power and peace
Mm-hmm.
that you're speaking of, having agency, taking control, not in a way that is angry. I'm not pissed at the way that it had been. I just didn't realize that I even had access to the steering wheel of this vehicle that is my life.
What woke you up to it?
I took an online business class in
Mm-hmm.
January of 2020
Mm-hmm.
led by a woman named Kathy Heller,
Mm-hmm.
and she was talking about getting paid to do what you love. And her
Mm-hmm.
podcast at the time was called Don't Keep Your Day Job. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just talking about integrating your passions
Mm-hmm.
into a sustainable business.
Mm-hmm.
And it it was just a collection of entrepreneurs in this online space, but even though I had had my own business for about 25 years at that time, I didn't know anybody else that had their own business. I didn't that's not true. I knew other wedding vendors that
Mm-hmm.
were doing it as well, but I hadn't been in a group of high vibe, passionate humans that did not all have corporate jobs that they hated. And so I found my people. And then there were all of these spiritual principles added onto it. And I when I signed up because I thought that this woman had information for me that I didn't have access to myself. So I was just trying to get in the hot seat and ask her a question because I knew she was going to tell me the one thing that my business was missing, and then I was going to implement it. And then Martha Stewart, watch out, or whatever. And in that course, I realized that the person that I was waiting for to give me permission to have the life I wanted was me.
Wow.
And I didn't know that. I didn't know that I had agency. And I'm not stupid. I just was conforming to what other people needed me to be, happily conforming, because I thought that they had my best interests in mind. And I really thought that I was allowed to want things, but that I wasn't allowed to have them. And I was addicted to disappointment. And these were things I just didn't know. I just thought this
Wow.
was how life went. And then
Mhm.
as soon as I realized I had agency, I made all sorts of new rules for myself, and I just didn't. I mean,
Wow.
you only know what you know, right?
Mhm.
And when you know better, you can do better,
Mhm.
and that is what I've been doing for the last 4.5 years, and I have not stopped, and nothing in my life is the same, with the exception of my fabulous daughter. Like, she's the only thing that
And
has stayed the same.
is this when you made the move?
No, I moved before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but this is when, my now ex-husband made his move.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of things shaking up, and, he's so much happier now. And he also didn't know that there was another way. He thought we were stuck. I thought we were stuck, and so I was just making the best of it, and I freed both of us in my
Wow.
decision to choose myself.
Wow. Yes, you and I could have
I
like
know,
another
right?
3 podcasts.
I know. I knew that as soon as I said hello to you. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
But that's a great story, and
Oh,
congratulations. It's
thank you.
incredible, right? Like what we endure sometimes, thinking that that's the path to happiness when it's actually making us miserable, and
Right.
that it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that
Right.
way. Yeah.
And I think that's, for me, the whole reason I said all of that was this concept of unconditional love, that it's not, I'm going to love you no matter what you do to me. And I'm just going to pretend you are not mean
Mm-hmm.
or hurtful or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It is choosing to create the conditions for myself
Mm-hmm.
that love rules, and that love abides in, and love grows in, and only be available to be
Mm-hmm.
in those conditions.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. That's incredible. I love that story.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Yes, wild applause.
Right back at you. Oh my goodness. Okay, so the fabulous humans go through your amazing course, and you've written a book.
I haven't. And I'm actually just putting myself out there. I discovered the process in 2012. And then in 2014, I started teaching it, but it really was teaching me.
Yeah.
Think about what's happened between 2014 and now in terms of, all that has been revealed to
Yes.
society, right, in
In
the
my
last
own
10
life.
years.
Yes.
And so it helped me take this knowledge that I had and really, push up
Mhm.
against could this stand, in this scenario? And could it stand in this
Mhm.
scenario? And it just really helped me identify all the nuance and all the important things, that it's very adaptable, the process
Right.
I teach, but I really wanted to make sure that it walked its talk. And so the last 10 years have given me this mega beta test. And so I've only started bringing
Absolutely.
it to a wider audience, for the last few months.
That's
And
so exciting.
yeah,
Congratulations.
it's my I'm a ripe fruit, you know?
You are. I love that. Do you
So,
have interest in a book?
so I know it needs to be a book, and my only hesitation at this point, and whenever it needs becomes a book, I will write the book. You know, I am
Sure.
a servant to, you know,
Yes.
that which is greater than me. I'm just, you know, a little hesitant to just put more words out there about it. You know, like I really do want to give people a transformational experience, and so doing it in the course is the most vivid way for me to give that to people, and
Sure.
teaching. And so, you know, I
Do
would
you
just
feel
hate.
like you have to choose?
Um, maybe, yeah.
Huh. Because when I say book, I don't
I don't
think
think she's, I
not a
just don't want
course.
someone to, you know, they read the book, they read a bunch of words, and then they put the book down and they're like, okay. There's a lot of people who just
Right.
read the book, right? You know, who just are
Right.
information takers.
Yep.
And it's like, no,
Right.
that's not it. You know, you can't just read this book and then be like, got it. Like, that's not how
Right.
this rolls. You know,
Right. It's
it
a
really takes,
practice.
like, it's a practice. And it's a beautiful practice. It's worth
Totally.
doing. I just know that books give people that that, like, okay, got it, you know, opportunity. Whereas if you come into my world, you know, you could still do that, you know, you could be like,
Sure.
okay, got it, but it's much less likely because I'm creating a space, you know, that like
Right.
invites people to do something super spiritual and super transformational that, you know, will leave them with a new worldview afterwards. And you
Absolutely.
know, and a greater amount of space, because as you probably noticed when you went through this incredible transformation, baggage takes up space,
Hmm.
right? And then you can't, there's nowhere for the new stuff to fit if
Right.
we're lugging around all the old
Right.
stuff, right? And
Yep.
so there's so many, like, you know, inner peace is obviously the number one reason why someone would study with me,
Sure.
but there's so many byproducts, right? Like greater
Right.
intuition, you know, greater soul alignment, like new beginnings, like better relationship, on and on the list goes. Yeah, again, you know, I haven't, my intuition tells me I will be writing the book one day. And
Good.
so,
Well, I lovingly encourage you to do so.
yeah, I want it to be some like fabulous coffee table book with like
Of
lots of, you
course.
know, illustrations and photos and, you know.
Right. And of course, and Asseline can publish it and it'll be beautiful, silk bound and
Yeah.
fabulous.
And someone sits in someone's living room and looks down and goes, what's
Right.
this? You know?
Right. And I love that beautiful discovery and treasure hunt that that is. What I love for you with the idea of a book or writing of some kind,
Mm-hmm.
whether it is a Substack or a blog or something,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is for that searchability, for that woman who finds herself where you were several
Mm-hmm.
years ago,
Yeah.
looking for an answer to that question.
Yes. Yes,
And
for sure.
that is just an introduction to you, and the right people are always going to want to go deeper.
Right.
And some people are just going to read the book. Some people are just going to listen to this podcast and go, "Oh, okay. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now I listened to something on forgiveness and now everything in
Yeah.
my world is
Yeah.
forgiven." That
Yeah.
there's, you know,
Yeah, and if I simply get a person to ask themselves, like, oh, is it something that's actually much bigger than pardoning? You know,
yeah.
I have succeeded, because, you know, those definitions, the four big definitions that circulate mainstream culture are pardoning, letting go, ceasing anger, and having compassion.
Mm,
And when you're in the throes of, you know, what I can call betrayal's aftermath or a rupture,
sure.
right? When you're in the
Right.
throes, those four things seem impossible and feel impossible to a lot of
Mhm.
people. That's where I was in 2012. That felt impossible to me.
Right.
And so then you kind of almost feel like, oh, and I can't like I'm going through this, and I'm kind of a spiritual failure right now also, because
Mm,
I don't have it in
right.
me to forgive. And so just what I loved what you said in the beginning, how unconditional love is something that we have access to. Like that's like
Mm,
one of my most favorite words to put next
yeah.
to the concept of unconditional love is access.
Right.
And that it's actually right. you don't have to be this unconditionally loving, holy
Yeah.
person who has compassion for your enemies and knows how to just let go and pardon.
Right. Floats around.
Like you actually delegate.
That's right. That's right. That's
It's a
right.
delegation. It's a delegate.
Appropriately delegate.
Yeah, or you enlist, right? You
Mm,
may know this story, but because it sounds like you had a Christian upbringing. Is
yes.
that correct? Yeah.
Yes,
Do you still identify as Christian?
I do.
Okay. So you have heard the story
I
of how
think. I
Jesus
don't
was
know. That's a good question. That's a whole nother podcast.
We're gonna hang up and you're gonna be like,
Right.
do
Wow.
I
I
identify as
know.
Christian?
Gosh, that is a good
Well, Jesus,
question. I love Jesus. I
you
can
love
say that.
Jesus,
I
right?
love
Jesus
Jesus.
is awesome,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So, one of the most famous forgiveness stories about Jesus is as he's on the cross being
Mm.
tortured
Mhm.
to death, he looks up and says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do."
Yeah.
And people cite that story because here he is in his final moments being
Mhm.
tortured to his death,
Right.
and he walked his talk. He
Yeah.
still had compassion for the people who were killing him. And
Yep.
what I love about that story is that I love that about the story, that he was
Yes.
high-minded until the very end.
Mhm.
Like what integrity. That's amazing. I love that.
Right.
But the other piece I love is that he actually delegated.
Yep.
He looked up and
Absolutely.
I say if you had interviewed him in that moment, he might have said, I'm being tortured right now. Like I
Right.
can't do it, myself, but I know
Yeah.
something bigger than me that can,
Mm.
and so I like to like illuminate that piece for
Yeah.
people, that it really is, it's not our ability to love unconditionally, it's our ability to enlist
Oh,
unconditional love.
that is gorgeous.
Thank you.
I love that. I have so many more questions, and I don't wanna
Okay,
wreck the
yes,
beauty of that.
but
That
we
was
we
so
did
good.
good. We did so good,
We did.
We got deep with each other.
I feel like we're a 3-day retreat waiting to happen.
Yes, let's do it. Let's
Let's
do
do
it. I
it. I'm
love
so
it.
excited. I'm super excited.
Awesome.
I do have a question for
Yeah.
you though. If you think that you can, if you can't answer it succinctly, then
Okay,
let's get on another call and do
okay.
this. But
Okay,
can
challenge me.
you explain how this level of forgiveness is not pardoning?
This level of forgiveness is the force that enables pardoning. I
Yeah.
say that pardoning, having compassion, letting go, and ceasing anger are
Mhm.
actually all potential results of
Mm,
forgiveness.
love it.
How was that?
Perfect.
Was I
That was
succinct? Okay,
perfect.
good.
It was perfect. And I agree. I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. I am a student of the Course in Miracles, and I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah.
with that
Hmm.
work. And there's a line about forgiveness that it's so, the whole premise of it is dismantling a thought system based on fear, rebuilding it with the thought system based on love, because
Hmm.
only love is real and everything else is an illusion.
Hmm.
And a line in the course reads that forgiveness is
Hmm.
the illusion that ends all illusion. And it's,
Wow.
yes, it's
Oh my
it's
God.
very deep. And it's not, because only love is
Wow.
real, nothing would ever need forgiveness and all of these things. And because we are having this human experience,
Hmm.
forgiveness is our bridge to the divine. It is our bridge to that access. It is the illusion that ends all illusion.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I have the chills. I love it. Thank you
It's
for
so
sharing that.
good. Oh my
That's
gosh.
amazing. That's amazing. So true. So,
Dara
so true.
McKinley, you're my new favorite. Ah,
Yes, as I said, I felt it as soon as I dove in. I prepared for this conversation. If I was a dog, you would have seen me wagging my tail, like as I I was like, I can't wait to meet her. I can't wait to meet her. I
golden
can't wait to meet
retrievers
her. Yeah.
unite. Oh my gosh, I love you. Thank you so
Yes,
much for
love you
being
too.
here.
Yeah, this
Please
was
tell
lovely. Thank you.
everyone where they can find and follow you.
Yes. So my website is what I typed in that night, howtoforgive.com. I'm
Perfect.
a little bit on social media. This is my place, is in these conversations. But you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I offer the course 3 times a year, every season. And if you feel inspired, I would love to have you.
Fantastic. We will link everything down in the show notes. I cannot wait to have you back. Thank you so
Aw,
much for
thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wrighthouse and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.